people really feel that Navalny is the future for normal European democratic Russia, and they're ready to risk their freedoms for him, and his supporters are really ready to pay very, very, very high prices for making this vision of new beautiful Russia of the future that Navalny gave to all of us become reality. And Putin deeply envies this because, as I said, he's a person who rules with fear as any autocrat. Hello, I'm Nadya Tolokonnikova, and I'm a creator of Riot.
Could you talk me through the moment when you found out that Navalny had passed away?
My daughter told me.
How did you feel?
Heartbroken. We cried for a while, and then we were in anger and rage.
Why do you think that he was killed?
I believe that Navalny was envied by Putin. I believe that Navalny is everything that Putin is not. He's actually a successful politician, unlike Putin, who happened to be a president of Russia pretty much by accident. So he never earned this position, and he never got actually, like, in a truthful, democratic way elected by Russian people. And he leads with fear, and in order to keep the power, he needs to increase repressions every year because the dissatisfaction rises in Russia. So if you look at Navalny, it is the exact opposite. It's a person who had nothing, who got all of his political rights stripped away from him. But no matter what, he was successfully running for different positions. Like he was running for the mayor of Moscow in 2013. Then Putin put him in jail for 5 years, but Russian people filled the streets, and the Russian government had to release Navalny under this enormous pressure. So people really feel that Navalny is the future for normal European democratic Russia, and they're ready to risk their freedoms for him, and his supporters are really ready to pay very, very, very high prices for making this vision of new beautiful Russia of the future that Navalny gave to all of us become reality. And Putin deeply envies this because, as I said, he's a person who rules with fear as any autocrat.
What was Navalny like as a person?
Incredibly resilient. I think it's number one. He made it look easy. He made the oppositional politics in Russia look easy, which was not easy at all. And as someone who is in activism since 2007, I have to say it's taken a big toll on me, my family, my mental health. It's really taxing when you're under constant a possibility of getting arrested, your life being taken away, your relatives being taken away from you. It is scary, but you cannot really make people excited about your vision and your path and your fight if you speak only from the position of the victim. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't talk about persecutions that you experience, but I think what's important here is the spirit. And Navalny was always able somehow, I don't know if it's his willpower or maybe he's just naturally a really high dopamine, high serotonin type person. I wish I was that, definitely not. And I think people look at him and they realize, oh, if he can withstand all of it, like, being even poisoned with Novichok, which is a very, very serious nerve agent, but then recover, jump on a plane, come back to Russia. And this a sense of incredible superhero, like heroic courage is this what I was lucky enough to have Navalny as a person who I knew and I could meet up with him, and it definitely radiates. We would travel with him to courts and to trials in different cities. He would always show up to people's trials, including Pussy Riot trial. And he's just very lively and conversational and extroverted.
As you mentioned yourself, you openly criticized Putin's regime in Russia. I remember 10 years ago watching videos of you demonstrating, seeing you fighting off police, getting beaten by police. If you could take yourself back to when you first started, do you think you were fully aware of the repercussions you would face for speaking out against Putin?
I started when I was 16. I was basically a fetus. So my first ever arrest was very scary. And I think I made a long way in learning how to be more resilient and just learning about the inner works of Russian political system. But it's also not static. It's getting so much better, so much worse. So things that I've learned about the political situation 10 years ago are not that applicable today. It's really turned from, authoritarian regime to military dictatorship these days. I did not know when I started what's going to happen, but I was aware at the time already of political prisoners. One of the cases that drawn me to politics was the case of Mikhail Khodorkovsky. And I was a teenager when I saw a sticker, Khodorkovsky go home, and I was interested who's Khodorkovsky, and I learned about it, and I realized that he used to be one of the powerful guys who decided to change the country to be more democratic, to go against Putin, which did not land well, and he ended up in jail. He spent there 10 years. Later, we became comrades and friends with Khodorkovsky. So I knew that it's a possibility for political activists, but I think my generation is a generation of people of this. It was a brief age of liberty and freedom in Russia, the 90s, and it brought a lot of economic turbulence. And that's why for a lot of older Russian people, the 90s is not something to be remembered with love and affection. But I was a baby, and I was shielded in that way by my parents from the economic realities. But I remember freedom and culture and gay culture and pop music and just Russia opening to the world, and this sense of euphoria that we all felt at the time. And I came into the first, for the first 2 terms of Vladimir Putin with this sense of euphoria that everything is still possible. But I couldn't help but see this sense of tightening, freedom tightening up, and and I knew I needed to do something about it. So long story short, I knew that political prisoners exist, but I was a child of the 90s, so I was thinking it's not going to happen with me.
And you did spend 2 years in penal colony following being arrested for and put on trial for alleged hooliganism. What was that experience like, especially as a political prisoner?
It was less than ideal. There are a few things that I need to point out when it comes to penal colonies in Russia. First major problem is medicine. You don't have access to any type of quality medicine. So if you happen to have any chronic or serious disease, you might die there. Second problem is living conditions and attitude towards prisoner. Our prison system was not reformed since the Gulag times. So if you read Solzhenitsyn, if you read Shalamov, then you can imagine what it is. In our penal colonies, prisoners are still forced to work, and oftentimes this law is being abused. So instead of 8 hours workday, they work shifts, 16 hours shifts, like it was in my penal colony. And the third major problem is lack of transparency. There is no inspection that can actually come into a prison and fix anything. So Russia is very corrupted, and even those people who are supposed to to be on the lookout for problems in prison system, their actual job is to cover all the wrongdoings of the prison officials.
And would you say that political prisoners were especially targeted, for example?
We got a very different treatment, but it wasn't special treatment in the positive sense of this term. I was like every movement was closely watched by the prison administration, and we've seen what happened with Navalny. He was put in jail inside jail, which we call like the isolation cell, which is a terrible place to be. It's cold, it's dark. You cannot really have access to books, and sometimes they deprive you even from having a pen there. It's not a condition to be in for any living being. I was watched very closely. If I appear without all the buttons being how to say, if I appear with the one button open, then it's a reason to punish me. So with that, it becomes much more difficult, and you get this sense of paranoia that you're being watched, but also it's not a paranoia. It's like actually reality. Then there are psychological tactics. So they did not influence me physically. They didn't want to beat me or likely kill me or poison me. So, but it was different time. Things were much lighter back then. But psychological pressure was really a lot to handle. Let's say me and you are in the same penal colony. I tell my lawyer something about human rights abuses, and you are the one who end up being punished for this, not me. You're the one who is getting punished, and because you are my friend, I feel responsible for your well-being. Obviously, it makes me shut up. Or let's say the whole penal colony loses the right to call their relatives for the next month, and they officially announced that it happened because of so and so. And then imagine what kind of anger all other prisoners feel towards you, because this is the logic of an abuser. It's them who are being abusive, but they accuse someone else of being the reason of this abuse.
You know, now in exile, how do you think that's impacted your activism? Do you think that you can still have the same amount of reach with the Russian people as you did when you were in Russia?
I think my situation is different. It's easier for artists. I think it's easier for us to be nomads. And of course, I want to be in Russia. I miss it. I miss culture. I miss architecture. I miss our people. It happens with everyone who cannot be in the country that they love, and they feel like it's their homeland. But it's different from being a 100% politician. And I feel like one of the reasons why Navalny chose to come back to Russia, because in order to be an effective and successful and actually influential politician, he felt like it's important to be in Russia. Would he make the same decision today during the war? I don't know, and I think that, I mean, there is no way to know now, but I can guess that his decision might be different, because the war, the full-scale invasion in Ukraine changed a lot, and freedoms started to really shrink after that full-scale invasion. But he made the decision before, and I think because he wanted to have this moral authority to tell Russian people what to do, to get out of the streets, to protest. You cannot really say that being in a relative safety of being abroad.
But he did have a big influence on social media platforms. With his YouTube, he'd post those investigative videos. Do you think that it was the right decision to go back in 2021?
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I was scared for him and for his life, so I would much rather prefer him to stay out of Russia. And I think, well, his wife told someone recently that she felt like he might get murdered when he comes back, but I think it speaks about his dedication to Russia and dedication to making Russia democratic. He wasn't blind to this possibility, but he still went, and I mean that's the reason why we call him a hero. Because I wouldn't do that. You probably wouldn't do that, but it's something that just we see normally just in movies, but here it is, human in flesh and blood.
We have seen in Russia that there have been protests related to the death of Navalny, but we haven't really seen that catalyze into anything bigger. If this can't motivate the Russian people, what do you think would? And do you think it ever will?
One of the opposition figures in Russia, Garry Kasparov, said something that I like to quote about this situation. He said, expecting Russian people to start a revolution today is the same as expecting Germans start a revolution in 1943.
Do you think that potentially his death could perhaps even further reduce dissident voices?
I think, well, I'm not a political scientist, so I don't think my opinion here is relevant, but from what I see as a political artist, I think it will take much more than that. It will take complex actions of the West. It will take Russian elites falling out of love with Vladimir Putin, and I think the West can also help them to fall out of love with Vladimir Putin a little bit by just providing them a version of the alternative future.
And Yulia Navalny, she says that she wants to continue her husband's work. What do you think about this? Do you think that she does have that power to create change?
I'm a big simp for Yulia Navalny. Somebody tweeted yesterday that Navalny can tweet anything, even just a dot, and I'm going to retweet it. I'm camp Navalny. As a feminist, I've always wanted to see her more involved in politics, but also, again, as a feminist, I respected her decision, and she was clear as a day that she's not interested in becoming a politician. She said she always wanted to be more private. And obviously, I would love if this rise of Yulia Navalny as a politician happen under different circumstances. But under these current circumstances, I back her up 125%. And I think she's a wonderful unifying figure for the oppositional movement in Russia and for Russians outside of Russia.
It's the 2-year anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. What are your thoughts on this conflict now that it's 2 years on?
My thoughts is that Putin's place in Hague, he's a war criminal and terrorist, and Russia is a terrorist state. It acts as a terrorist state these days, and it has to be stopped.
And you've come face to face with Putin yourself. What's your assessment of him?
He's a little gray man with little personality. He does not have confidence, and he, as a lot of people with a lack of confidence, he covers it with bravado. He's a macho for that exact reason. He built his self-esteem at the expense of women, as he said to in his famous interview to Oliver Stone. I'm not a woman. I don't have bad days. And it's not the first or last time when he was building his confidence at the expense of women. And he is part of the KGB system. And as we say in Russia, there is no such a thing as an ex-KGB agent. his flesh and blood KGB system, and there is no change in Russia possible until this person is being removed from power.
And then in terms of the international community, we've had today, the UK, they had imposed further sanctions on Russia in response to Navalny's death. But at the same time, we've had US Republicans blocking aid. Ukraine's called for more weapons to be sent there. How do you think the international community is doing in terms of supporting Ukraine?
I think it can be doing much better. I think it's important to realize that Putin is a threat not only to Russian people, but Putin is a threat to peace and security in the whole entire world. And it takes a unified response, and response has to be much stronger than today.
What would your message be to the international community?
Just do it. It's in your power to see to it, to make sure that Vladimir Putin is not a threat to people inside Russia and people out in the whole entire world. Just I know it's difficult to coordinate, but I think it's a global issue, and it needs a strong global unified response.
What do you see for the future of this conflict? We've potentially got Donald Trump coming back for a second presidency in America. How do you think that's going to influence relations? How do you see this ending?
Well, I just really hope that Donald Trump is not going to get elected. But if he is, well, luckily, American system is different from Russian system in a lot of ways, and it actually does have systems of checks and balances. And I really hope that there will be other ways how to push for the support to Ukraine if Trump gets elected.
What would you say would be your favorite memory of Navalny that you shared with him?
When he got sentenced for years in jail, his reaction was to send a gesture of heart. He did this to his wife through the glass box where he was confined, and I think it tells us a lot about him. He leads with love, and he doesn't let fear to change his actions. And it really encapsulates, this gesture really encapsulates a lot about Navalny. And I know it became a symbol of protest for some Russian people these days, because Russians, because they live in a dictatorship, they cannot really do a lot. Even putting flowers at Navalny memorials can land you in jail. So they're coming up with different alternative ways how to express their defiance without necessarily risking their own lives. So this gesture with hands is one of those.